They say Dean Martin is born on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio. The birth certificate says so. The history books confirm it. Every obituary will repeat it, but birth certificates lie, and the dead don't correct the record. The truth is, Dean Martin isn't born until 1940. He isn't born in a hospital. He isn't born in Ohio. He is born in the bathroom of a Cleveland nightclub, staring at his own reflection in a cracked mirror, his hands gripping the porcelain sink so hard his knuckles turn white, because on that night, a 23-year-old Italian kid named Dino Crocetti doesn't just change his name, he commits murder. He kills the only version of himself that ever existed. He buries Dino in an unmarked grave somewhere between the sink and the door, and he walks out as someone else, someone the world will love, someone who will sell millions of records and make presidents laugh and become the king of cool. But the man who walks out of that bathroom will spend 55 years running from the ghost of the man he killed. This is the story no one ever told you. This is the night Dino Crocetti died. What Dean whispers to himself in that mirror, he will never repeat. Not to his wives, not to his children, not even to Frank Sinatra, the man he called brother for 40 years. But one man heard it. One bartender, standing in the hallway, close enough to see the tears streaming down the kid's face, close enough to hear the words that would haunt him for 60 years. To understand why a man would murder his own name, you have to go back 15 years, to Steubenville, Ohio, to 1925, to a world that doesn't exist anymore. Steubenville was a steel town. The smokestacks painted the sky gray from dawn to dusk, and the air tasted like iron and ash and broken promises. The Ohio River ran thick with industrial waste, and the men who worked the mills came home with lungs full of soot and hands calloused like leather. And in a neighborhood the Americans called Little Italy, pronounced like a disease, like something you caught and couldn't cure, the Crocetti family lived in a cramped apartment above a barber shop on South 6th Street. Gaetano Crocetti cut hair 6 days a week. He spoke broken English and perfect Italian. He had come to America with nothing but a pair of scissors and a dream that his sons would have it better than he did. His son Dino spoke neither language well. Until he was 5 years old, Dino Crocetti didn't know a single word of English. His world was Italian. His food was Italian. His prayers were Italian. His lullabies were Italian. And when he finally walked into an American public school, the other children had a vocabulary ready for him. Dago, wop, greaseball. The words followed him everywhere. In the schoolyard where the bigger kids shoved him against the fence. In the streets where shopkeepers watched him with suspicious eyes. In the boxing ring where he learned to fight back with his fists because his English wasn't good enough to fight back with words. By the time he was 16, Dino had a broken nose and scarred knuckles and a reputation as a kid you didn't want to corner. But he also had something else. Something that surprised everyone who heard it. A voice. A God-given honey-smooth voice that could make women cry and men forget their troubles. But in 1940, America didn't want to hear it. By the time Dino Crocetti was 23 years old, he had auditioned at 14 clubs in 3 cities. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Youngstown, 14 rejections. Always the same answer, delivered with the same apologetic shrug. Sorry kid, we don't book Italians. It wasn't personal, it was business. America was watching Mussolini march across Europe. The newspapers were full of stories about Italian fascism, and the last thing a nightclub owner wanted was a singer with a name that reminded paying customers of the enemy. Dino understood the logic, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. Eddie Corso was a bartender at Rex's cigar store, a Cleveland nightclub that wasn't really a cigar store. It was a speakeasy that had survived prohibition and reinvented itself as a jazz club. Eddie had worked there for 12 years. He had seen 100 young singers come through the door, desperate and hungry and convinced they were going to be the next Bing Crosby. But he had never seen one as desperate as the Italian kid who walked in that Tuesday night in March 1940. The kid had circles under his eyes, and a suit that was too big for him, and a look that Eddie recognized immediately. The look of a man with nowhere else to go. Eddie didn't know it yet. In 2 hours he would witness something that would stay with him for 60 years. The club owner's name was Sammy Watkins. He ran a 12-piece orchestra, and he needed a singer. The last one had been drafted, shipped off to basic training somewhere in Georgia, and Watkins was desperate enough to hold open auditions. Dino stood in front of him, hat in hand, trying to look confident and failing. "What's your name, kid?" "Dino Crocetti." Watkins's face changed, that slight tightening around the eyes, that almost invisible flinch that Dino had seen 100 times before, the face of a man who had already made up his mind. "You Italian?" "Yes, sir. But we don't book Italians." Dino didn't move. He stood there, hat in hand, staring at the man behind the desk. The man who had just closed another door. The man who hadn't even let him sing one note. Something snapped. Maybe it was the 15th rejection. Maybe it was the way Watkins had said Italian, like it was a disease. Maybe it was 23 years of being told he wasn't good enough, would never be good enough, could never be good enough. You didn't even hear me sing, Dino said. His voice was quiet, but it wasn't weak. Watkins looked up from his cigar, surprised. Most kids just left. Most kids apologized for wasting his time and slunk out the door with their tails between their legs. This one wasn't leaving. Excuse me? You heard me. Dino took a step forward. You didn't hear me sing. You heard my name, that's all. You heard Crocetti, and you made up your mind. Watkins leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed. Kid, I've been in this business for 30 years. Then you should know better. The room went silent. Eddie Corso, standing by the bar, stopped polishing glasses. He had never seen anyone talk to Watkins like that. Nobody talked to Watkins like that. Watkins' jaw tightened. You got some nerve, kid. I got a voice, Dino said. That's what I got. And you're too scared to hear it because my name has too many vowels. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the muffled jazz from the main room and the distant clink of glasses. Watkins could have called security. He could have had Dino thrown out on the street. He had done it before, to bigger men than this skinny Italian kid with the broken nose. But there was something in the kid's eyes, something that made Watkins pause. It was certainty. The quiet, dangerous certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was worth. Watkins took a long drag of his cigar. He studied Dino through the smoke. You really think you're that good? I know I am, and you're willing to do whatever it takes. Dino hesitated. Just for a second, just long enough for Watkins to see the crack in the armor. Whatever it takes, Dino said quietly. Watkins smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Then lose the name. Ain't that a kick in the head? Dino muttered under his breath. 15th rejection, and this one came with conditions. Watkins lit a fresh cigar. He studied Dino for a long moment, squinting through the smoke like a man appraising a horse at auction. You got a good look, Watkins said finally. Handsome. The ladies would like you. And that voice, he shrugged. I heard you warming up outside. You can sing, I'll give you that. Then why? But that name. Watkins shook his head slowly. That name is a death sentence in this business. Dino Crocetti. Sounds like a guy who runs numbers for the mob. No offense. It's my father's name, Dino said quietly. Your father isn't trying to sell records. Watkins leaned forward, elbows on his desk. I'll give you a shot, kid. One night, Saturday. But not as Dino Crocetti. Then as who? I don't know. Watkins waved his hand dismissively. Make something up. Something American. Something they can pronounce without spitting. Something that sounds like it belongs on a marquee. Dino stood there for a long moment. He thought about walking out. He thought about telling Watkins to go to hell. He thought about his father's face, the pride in his eyes every time he introduced his son as Dino Crocetti. But then he thought about 14 rejections, 14 closed doors, 14 club owners who had looked at him and seen nothing but a dago with a dream. Okay, Dino whispered. Okay. What happened in the next 20 minutes would erase Dino Crocetti from existence. Almost. That night, Dino Crocetti walked into the bathroom of Rex's cigar store and locked the door behind him. The bathroom was small and dirty and smelled like cheap disinfectant. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows on the tile walls. And the mirror above the sink was cracked, a long diagonal line that split the reflection in two. Dino stood in front of it and stared at himself. On one side of the crack he saw the Italian kid from Steubenville. The broken nose, the scarred knuckles, the eyes of a man who had been told no so many times he was starting to believe it. On the other side he saw a stranger, someone he didn't recognize, someone who didn't exist yet. He thought about his father, cutting hair in that tiny barbershop, still calling him Dino in that thick Italian accent that embarrassed him and broke his heart at the same time. He thought about his mother, praying for him every night in Italian, lighting candles for a son she didn't understand but loved anyway. He thought about every time someone had called him Dago and he had pretended not to hear. And then he thought about the stages, the lights, the applause he had never received, the life he had always wanted and could never have. Not as Dino Crocetti. For a moment he just stood there, breathing. The only sound was the drip of a leaky faucet and the muffled music from the club below. A saxophone was playing something slow and sad, and it sounded like a funeral march. And then Dino Crocetti made a decision that would change everything, a decision he would never be able to take back. 47 seconds. That's how long it took to kill Dino Crocetti. He gripped the sink with both hands. His knuckles went white. He looked at the crack in the mirror, at the two halves of his face, and he made his choice. He chose the stranger. Dean. He said it out loud, testing it, tasting it on his tongue like a foreign word. Dean Martin, Martin, not his father's name, not Crocetti. Something new, something clean, something American, something that wouldn't make club owners flinch, something that belonged on a marquee. He said it again. Dean Martin, and again. Dean Martin. Each time, Dino Crocetti got a little smaller. Each time, the stranger in the mirror got a little more real. Outside the bathroom door, Eddie Corso stood in the hallway. He had come to check on the kid. He had seen that look before, the look of a man about to give up, about to walk out the back door and disappear into the Cleveland night. But through the thin wooden door he heard something else. He heard the kid talking to himself, repeating a name over and over, a name that wasn't his. He paused. The dripping faucet counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, and then Eddie heard something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "Goodbye, Dino," the kid whispered to the mirror. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was final. It was the voice of a man closing a door and throwing away the key. And then, so quiet that Eddie almost missed it. "I killed him myself." Eddie froze. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should knock, should walk away, should pretend he hadn't heard anything. And then the door opened, and Dean Martin walked out. Same face, same voice, same broken nose and scarred knuckles. But the eyes were different. Eddie saw it immediately. Something had changed in those 47 seconds. Something had died behind those eyes, and something else had been born. "You okay, kid?" Eddie asked. Dean Martin looked at him. That sleepy, half-lidded look that would one day become famous. That casual smile that would make millions of women swoon. "Never better, pal," Dean said. "Never better." That night, Dean Martin took the stage at Rex's cigar store. He sang "Oh Marie." He sang "I Got the Sun in the Morning." He sang with the same voice Dino Crocetti had always had. The same honey-smooth baritone. The same effortless phrasing. But the audience didn't hear an Italian kid from Steubenville. They heard Dean Martin, an American, a crooner, a star. The applause was like nothing he had ever experienced. It washed over him like a wave, like a baptism, like the world finally saying yes after years of no. And for the first time in his life, Dino Crocetti, no, Dean Martin, felt like he belonged. Over the next 3 years, Dean Martin became a name. Not a big name, not yet, but a name that club owners recognized. A name that didn't make them flinch. He sang with Sammy Watkins' orchestra for 8 months. He moved to New York. He played the Rio Bamba, the same club where Frank Sinatra had gotten his start. He made connections. He learned the business. He became Dean Martin, one syllable at a time. That night in Cleveland, Dean Martin sang for the first time, and somewhere deep inside, Dino Crocetti listened from the shadows, wondering if the applause was worth the price. But every success came with a price. Every time someone called him Dean, he felt something flinch somewhere inside him. A phantom limb. A ghost. Every time he signed an autograph with his new name, he was writing Dino's obituary. Every time a woman whispered Dean in his ear, he heard the echo of a name that no longer existed. He went home to Steubenville once, in 1942. His father was still cutting hair in the same barber shop on South 6th Street, still speaking broken English, still smelling like talcum powder and hair tonic. "I saw your name in the paper," Gaetano said, not looking up from his scissors. He was cutting some old man's hair, the same methodical strokes he had used for 40 years. "Dean Martin, who is this?" "It's me, Papa." "No." Gaetano shook his head slowly. "Dean Martin is not my son. Dino is my son. Dino Crocetti. That is who I raised. That is who your mother prays for." And Dean said nothing, because what could he say? That he had killed Dino? That he had murdered his own name in a bathroom with a cracked mirror? That the son Gaetano had raised no longer existed? He just sat in the old barber chair and let his father cut his hair in silence. And when it was over, he left a $50 bill on the counter and walked out without saying goodbye. By 1946, Dino Crocetti seemed erased from existence. The name appeared on no marquee, no record label, no contract. His draft card said Dean Martin. His driver's license said Dean Martin. His social security card said Dean Martin. Even his own mother had started slipping, calling him Dean when she forgot herself, then crossing herself and apologizing in Italian. The murder was complete. The body was buried. The evidence was destroyed. Dean Martin had gotten away with it, or so it seemed. But here's the thing about killing a part of yourself. The ghost never really leaves. Over the years, Dean developed rituals to keep Dino buried. He never spoke Italian in public. He never mentioned Steubenville in interviews unless forced. He constructed an elaborate mythology around his past, vague stories about boxing and card dealing that revealed nothing and concealed everything. When reporters asked about his childhood, he would smile that famous smile and change the subject. When old friends from Ohio tried to reconnect, he was polite but distant. He had built a wall between Dean Martin and Dino Crocetti, and he guarded that wall with everything he had. But late at night, alone in hotel rooms across America, he would sometimes catch his reflection in a mirror. And for just a moment, a fraction of a second, he would see the Italian kid staring back. The kid with the broken nose and the hungry eyes. The kid who had died in a Cleveland bathroom so Dean Martin could live. Those were the moments when Dean poured himself another drink. Those were the moments when the mask slipped. Years later, Eddie Corso, the bartender who had heard those words through the bathroom door, gave an interview to a local Cleveland newspaper. "I saw him go into that bathroom as Dino," Eddie said, his voice trembling with age. 20 minutes later, he came out as someone else. Same face. But the eyes were different, like he'd made a deal with the devil. The reporter asked if Dean Martin had ever acknowledged what happened that night. "I asked him once," Eddie said. "Years later, in Vegas. I walked up and said, 'Hey Dino, remember Cleveland?' What did he say?" Eddie smiled sadly. He looked at me with those Dean Martin eyes and said, "Dino who?" 55 years. That's how long Dean Martin performed. 67 movies, 32 albums, 9 seasons of a television show watched by 40 million Americans every week. And in all that time he never once performed as Dino Crocetti, a kid from Steubenville who couldn't speak English until he was 5. A kid who was called Doggo and Wop every day of his childhood. A kid whose father cut hair in a shop that smelled like talcum powder and broken dreams. That kid had to die so Dean Martin could live. And maybe that's the saddest part of this story. Dino Crocetti never got to see what he became. He was sacrificed at 23 years old, murdered in a bathroom with a cracked mirror, buried in an unmarked grave somewhere between the sink and the door. Dean Martin got the applause. Dino Crocetti just got erased. We all have 2 names. The name we were given and the name we choose. The name our parents whispered over our cribs, and the name we write on our own tombstones. We all have a version of ourselves we had to kill to survive. A childhood self, an innocent self, a self that believed the world was fair, and names didn't matter, and talent was enough to open any door. We all stand in front of a mirror at some point and decide, who am I going to be, and what am I willing to destroy to become him? 23, the age Dino Crocetti died. 47 seconds, the time it took to kill him. 0, the people who mourned him. 55, the years Dean Martin performed in his place. 1, the ghost that never stopped haunting him. Today Dean Martin's image lives forever. The tuxedo, the cigarette, the smile, millions remember it. It represents elegance, success, the American dream. Dino Crocetti's boxing gloves were thrown in a dumpster behind a Steubenville gym in 1940. Nobody saved them, nobody remembered them. One man preserved his image for eternity. The other erased his past and never looked back. Both of them were the same person. Years later, when asked about his early struggles, Dean would shrug and say, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" But if you listened closely, you could hear something behind the joke, the echo of a name that nobody spoke anymore. The echo of Dino Crocetti, still staring at that cracked mirror, still waiting for someone to let him out. Dean Martin died on Christmas morning, 1995. The obituaries said he was born in 1917. They were wrong. Dean Martin was born in 1940, in a bathroom in Cleveland, in 47 seconds of silence. And Dino Crocetti died the same night. The only witness was a cracked mirror, and the only evidence was a whisper that no one was supposed to hear. "I killed him myself.